Hey everybody, it's Jenna. The Supergirl trailer is officially here. That still feels surreal to say, even as I have seen it multiple times. I was so honored to attend the trailer premiere event in New York earlier this week, which was so much fun and so emotionally rewarding in ways that I can't even put into words. Ever since this movie was first announced as part of the initial DC Studios slate, I have known in my bones that it is going to be something special. And this trailer confirmed that for me in so many ways, as did the very palpable energy of being in the room for it. It is just so lively and has such a strong sense of personality, and I'm so glad that everyone else now gets to fall in love with it too. Also, it almost goes without saying, but I'm going to reference Tom King and Bill Evely's Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, the series that the movie is based on, a lot in this video. Whether you've read it, are going to read it before the movie, or are waiting until after, a topic I have a whole separate video about, by the way, I'm still not going to sit here and flat out spoil things. I will still reference things as needed, but I'm going to skirt around some of the more specific plot points wherever possible. The trailer shows us a lot and has way more dialogue than I was expecting without really giving too much away, and I love that so much. It so feels like it's in the same world as Superman without being a carbon copy of anything. The cinematography and the color grading and the energy are just so unique to this specific story, which is how it should be. And it already feels so much like a Craig Gillespie movie, which is a joy for me because I thoroughly love so much of his work, and particularly how he's been able to flip people's perceptions of well-known women. I, Tonya is one of the best biopics I've ever seen. The aesthetic of her room makes me so happy. I'm sure there will ultimately be some Easter eggs hidden within it, probably that I'll even realize while I'm splicing the footage into this video, but I think it just already says a lot without even really saying a word. It tells us what some of the cosmic objects and ephemera look like in this universe, and as much as I know people are going to draw the very obvious comparisons to Guardians, DC Comics proved that there is a goldmine for how different it can look and how lived in it can feel. But it also tells us a lot about Kara. She values comfort, she collects things on her adventures, and she is messy in a not curated way. Don't get me wrong, I loved her cozy rom-com apartment on the show, and even the storytelling we got with her and Lucy Lane's dorm in the 80s movie, but there's something about this that just feels so relatable. The DCU has already multiple times over used aesthetics in characters' rooms to further tell a story. Chris struggling to feel comfortable in every aspect of his life, including his dad's room, Amelia's priorities as her financial situation gets worse, and Lois's full life that seems incongruent with falling in love with a superhero. And then there's Clark, his bare bones apartment in Metropolis, his teenage bedroom in Smallville, and even the layout of the Fortress of Solitude all say so much about who he is and who he wants to be. So it's wonderful to be getting that here with Kara, even briefly before the movie takes us to so many different other places. It's time for one of my favorite things, pausing to talk about a single frame of ephemera for way too long. We see an issue of the Daily Planet, which Crypto pees on, and which kind of perfectly exemplifies Superman and Supergirl's dynamic here. The date appears to be Thursday, October 1st, which would line up with the 2026 calendar and roughly place the movie in the present day of when it is being released. And the edition number in the corner is roughly 300 more than the final paper we saw in June of 2025 in Superman, so that does make sense. I'm just glad to have that detail already, just to pass the time since Superman and Peacemaker Season 2 without actually having to deal with the ramifications of Salvation yet. Plus, it's time to update my timeline. The top headline is about Clark saving people from a nuclear plant explosion, while she is almost below the fold having saved cats, presumably from a tree. Let's start with the cats. The trope of someone saving a cat from a tree has become ubiquitous at this point, not just for Superman and other characters on his power level, but just for protagonists in general. The act or acts like it are so small but so selfless that it helps the audience immediately become endeared to the character. There's an entire screenwriting technique built around that mindset, which myself and probably tens of thousands of other people have had to read while we were in film school. The first instance of it in the comics might be this cover to 1949's Adventure Comics number 146, followed by 1959's Superman number 129, a story where Clark Kent, and not Superman, saves the cat while on an assignment as a voluntary fireman. I love that issue, by the way, because it basically just evolves into hijinks of Clark pretending that he's lucky and doesn't have superpowers to the chagrin of everybody else. But after the first Donner movie, the act became a part of the cultural DNA and has appeared in countless stories ever since. It even became one of the last controversies of the pre-New 52 era, reportedly because DC execs thought that it was way too old-fashioned of a thing for Superman to do. A version of that argument has lingered ever since, especially in other media. We even saw a version of it with the squirrel moment in Superman, which almost didn't make the cut because test audiences worried that it seemed way too small. But that scope of it is kind of the point. It seems small, but it still has consequences and gravity to it. And the fact that characters who are this absurdly powerful care enough to do it speaks volumes to the audience. Kara even admits in The Daring New Adventures of Supergirl number 1 that she'd blow off a date with Robert Redford to do it, a joke that has only aged better with time. And I think that having this Kara still care enough to save cats immediately tells us a lot about her. She might be going through it, but she is still a superhero in every single sense of the word, something that the original text of Women of Tomorrow plays with beautifully. Even though it's fairly recent, that photo of her gives me massive Silver Age vibes, and also raises a question that I've had ever since first seeing Superman. What is Kara's history and reputation as Supergirl, not just on Earth, but across the galaxy? Did she crash land on Earth before or after Clark went public as Superman in 2022. When did she become Supergirl in relation to that? We know, thanks to the retconned opening of Peacemaker Season 2, that she worked with the Justice Gang at least once at some point around early 2023. Had she just started being a superhero around that time, or was she already just doing her own thing in space? I could see either option, but I would personally lean towards the latter, because there is so much narrative freedom to play within that. Woman of Tomorrow plays with it by being nebulously set in Clark and Kara's prime, while still acknowledging years worth of history when necessary. There's obviously a smaller amount of runway to do that here, and there's one thing teased later in the trailer that I have a lot of questions about, but I feel like there's a way to make it all work. I also feel like this movie is really going to have fun with the idea of Superman and Supergirl. Not so much their personal dynamic, although I would not be surprised at all if David cameos, but their reputations both in the DC universe and in ours. I feel like practically ever since she's debuted, a lot of people have held a limited version of Supergirl in their heads and not even really known it. It's not quite the fandom flanderization that I've talked about on this channel, especially when you have the very confusing tapestry of the half dozen different women who have worn the mantle of Supergirl, but instead of really engaging with the differences between them, the larger pop culture has boiled down the concept of Supergirl to sunny, happy-go-lucky, or a girl version of Clark. Not only does that sell the entire mantle of Supergirl short, but it especially sells Kara Zor-El short, especially when her story is so uniquely compelling. I'll talk about this more later, but she grew up on Krypton. She remembers it and she mourns it in a way that is entirely different from Clark having left it as a baby. But by the time she was even introduced in the comics, people had already started to take the destruction of Krypton for granted as a plot point. Once you sit with the horror of what that destruction means and how that could forever shape a person, it changes how you see Kara. It justifies why she can and should go about the world very differently from Clark. I have banged that drum in multiple videos, and I will probably continue to do so until the end of time, and it's something that James also echoed at the launch event. Woman of Tomorrow captured that realization in a way that no other modern Supergirl story really has, and it's a huge part of why I've been so excited to see a version of this story told on this big of a scale. We even get a bit of that dichotomy in one of the lines of dialogue, when she acknowledges that Kal-El sees the good in people, but she sees the truth in them. I think Crypto peeing on the newspaper is indicative of all of that and more. It's not some crazy man-hating thing, it's just a nod to the idea that Kara is her own complex person who goes about the world differently than her beloved and largely earthbound cousin. Also, Kara's reaction to Crypto successfully peeing on the paper feels like something that any dog owner is going to relate to. I know I do. On that note, we need to talk about Crypto. I'm so excited to see just how different his dynamic is with Kara versus Clark beyond the roughhousing scene at the end of Superman. And I'm hoping that the rest of the marketing presents him with this same kind of energy and presence without giving too much of the actual story away. Crypto plays a pivotal, irreplaceable role in one aspect of Woman of Tomorrow. I'm not going to spoil it here, and don't be an asshole and spoil it in the comments either. And I do think, especially with the massive audience that this movie deserves to get, that there's a way for future trailers to continue to dance around it, just so everyone can get the full context of how it unfolds in the movie itself. Like I said in my recent video about the Woman of Tomorrow comic, this movie is such a unique opportunity to adapt a single text without simply remaking it, and to add some fun flourishes where it makes sense both for the story and for the medium. And I think once we actually get into the bulk of the trailer, we can see all of that in spades. Call Me by Blondie is such a fun choice here, and I am not just saying that because Blondie is a band that is already on heavy rotation for me. It's a classic that everyone loves without being too ubiquitous, and that kind of new wave music just feels so on brand for this movie and for Kara. I also feel like the lyrics play with the sentiment of, this looks like a job for Superman or Supergirl. You can call on her whenever you need her, and she'll be there, even if she is a bit of a mess. I love that we get a version of her incognito outfit from the first issue. It feels more modern and casual, but still has the same silhouette down to the boots. Is she wearing her suit under her clothes like she is in the comic? I honestly don't know, in part because we haven't had to deal with a costume change like that yet in this universe. I do kind of love that we haven't, because Clark just switching back and forth into Superman off screen helped that movie be even breezier, and it just feels so much more real that Peacemaker and Vigilante would just wear their outfits around the house, or that Guy Gardner would wear it while sitting in a diner eating Fruity Pebbles. But with this story and with lanterns, I feel like we're gonna play with that a little bit more. Also, it took me an embarrassingly long amount of time to realize this because my brain just had so much going on. Kara and I basically have the same sunglasses. I have had these for 2 years. Imagine if I just wore these for the rest of the video. One thing that got debated quite a lot after the trailer event was the space bus, and whether or not that will be how Kara and Ruthie get around for a good chunk of the movie. In Woman of Tomorrow, they use multiple modes of transportation, space buses, but also just flying around from place to place, either on or off panel. Kara also utilizes Comet the Super Horse, and I keep going back and forth on whether or not he'll be in the movie for a lot of reasons, even though I do think this Gail Simone quote from almost 20 years ago still rings true. Quote, "A lot of young girls would like Supergirl more if she had a flying horse." I feel like this movie's gonna do a mix of all of the transportation options, but maybe maybe not in the way that we're expecting. There are a few flying sequences in the book that I absolutely believe we will see adapted on screen, but I'd rather let those moments pack the biggest punch possible instead of just being sandwiched between her and Ruthie flying everywhere. The Supergirl movie from the 80s had a bit of that same problem. Some of the flight choreography and wire work is genuinely incredible, especially for the time, but the gimmick kind of wears thin as the movie goes along. Also, I am so happy that it already looks like we have this guy from the space bus. The trailer also confirms that she's celebrating her 23rd birthday, which is 2 years older than she is at the start of Woman of Tomorrow, and a change that does make sense given the fact that she's already been drinking. And if Clark is supposed to be as old as David Cornsweet, meaning that he's in his early 30s, then the age difference between the two of them does make sense here. We get some gorgeous shots of Krypton and Argo City, and I'm sure that the VFX is only going to get even better and better once we get closer to the movie. Seriously, looking back at these two shots from the first Superman trailer is kind of crazy in hindsight. I love the aesthetic of the Kryptonian clothes, and we briefly see what appears to be a funeral procession. I'm going to assume it's for Kara's mom, Allura, whose death is just one component of her backstory in Woman of Tomorrow, to the point where I do feel comfortable kind of talking about it here. Let's get into that backstory and the Argo City of it all. In Kara's very first appearance, 1959's Action Comics number 252, Otto Binder and Al Plastino explained how she was able to exist decades after Clark had come to Earth. A chunk of Krypton had survived the planet's destruction, complete with an air bubble and the means to survive. But it also had something else, radiation poisoning from the ground having been transformed into kryptonite. Kara's dad, Zor-El, led everyone to cover the ground in sheets of lead to block the kryptonite. They managed to survive for a while, and Kara was born and raised there, until meteors started destroying the lead sheets. In a panic, Kara's parents built her a rocket to travel to another planet, and used an absurdly powerful telescope to scope out Superman and send her to Earth to join him. He then decided to kind of be a dick about it and immediately dump her into an orphanage, which will always be funny to me. Action Comics number 309 then expanded upon this backstory. Zor-El intentionally built a bubble over part of Krypton, now known as Argo City, to help protect it from diseases and germs and stuff like that, only for it to happen to be useful upon the planet's destruction. It drifted towards the yellow sun, and everyone briefly got powers, including baby Kara. The meteors fell, and Kara was sent to Earth, but Zor-El and Allura managed to escape into a pocket universe known as the Survival Zone. Subsequent stories have added even more layers to this, that Brainiac was partially responsible for what happened to Argo, that Argo was never a part of Krypton to begin with, and that Kara was born and raised on Krypton before it even exploded. Fans have really latched onto that latter one, and it is folded into the backstory of Woman of Tomorrow. This caused quite a stir earlier this year when James said that Kara is definitely younger than Clark and wouldn't know why the L's have their worldview. I do feel like there are ways to explain that. Time dilation, or a mix of the Silver Age origin and the expanded Woman of Tomorrow origin. Either way, it is going to be undeniable that Kara lived on Krypton and endured a lot before leaving it. And if the movie translates even a fraction of what's in the book, which I know it will, then it is going to be something beautiful. The line of, quote, "Krypton didn't die in a day, the gods are not that kind," already gives me full-body goosebumps. Let's get into some of the other characters. Ruthie could not look more perfect. She was created by King and Evely specifically for this series, and has only made one additional comic appearance outside of it, in 2 panels from Action Comics number 1077. She is a young girl whose quest for revenge is one of the inciting incidents of the story. Meanwhile, Krem looks nothing like his comic appearance, and I honestly love it. Also created by King and Evely, he is Krem of the Yellow Hills, a pirate assassin who also plays a big role in the book's inciting incidents. The comic definitely gave him more of a traditional sword and sorcery vibe, and there is something thematically interesting to the idea of him being so evil and so vicious while just looking like a guy, but I think this change works really well here. It helps sell the heightened fantastical nature and potential of this universe. It makes him look memorable in an age where people have been underwhelmed by countless superhero movie villains, and it just lets him look creepy as hell. I've already heard so many comparisons to Taserface from Volume 2, but I think that'll actually change once we see more than just this shot of him. And just based on this and Sunrise on the Reaping, 2026 is going to be a banner year for pins and faces of characters that you just want to punch. I'm pretty sure that these are the Brigands, a group of space pirates who get into the story's orbit in a number of different ways. They were also created specifically for Woman of Tomorrow, and I feel like there is a lot of room to explore and play with them, which is great. Also, Kara's line about how, quote, "This does not look like it's going to end well for you guys," perfectly emulates issue 1 without just lifting from it directly. There are a few lines of dialogue in the comic that I am really hoping carry over word for word, but again, I think the beauty of this movie is that it'll get to stand alongside the comic as an adaptation and not as a replacement. And then we have Lobo. I kept joking at the launch party afterwards that that's not even Jason Momoa, that is just Lobo. He looks like he literally walked off the page and became real, which is saying something when the Krypton TV show already set the bar pretty high. And I am so glad that he has the cigar, something that would have been a huge point of contention just a few years ago. I already have a Lobo video from last year, but just to give you the Cliff Notes version, he was created by Roger Slifer and Keith Giffen in 1983's Omega Men number 3, and was eventually established as the last surviving member of the utopian alien race known as the Zarnians, after he killed all of them himself. He grew to become one of DC's wackiest and most beloved 90s characters. characters, resulting in crossovers and parodies that genuinely need to be seen to be believed. I am still holding out hope for an adaptation of the Lobo paramilitary Christmas special, where the Easter Bunny asks him to assassinate Santa Claus. Jason Momoa has been wanting to play the role of Lobo forever, to the point of thinking that that was the role he was getting when he first got the callback for the DCEU's Aquaman. And it just feels so right that he gets to do it here, and that his presence gets to fundamentally shake up what we're expecting for this story. King originally pitched the book as a two-hander between Kara and Lobo before it pivoted to just being her solo story. It's not like he's going to be the co-lead of this movie, but there are so many things that you can do with him. There are ways for him and Kara to bond over being the last of their kind, over their drinking habits, and just over their fighting styles too. He could have a bone to pick with Krem, or he could just be another colorful character who Kara and Ruthie meet on their journey, and whose presence helps establish even more of this universe. Either way, I love it. I look forward to him getting his kind of Mr. Terrific moment and fully becoming a household name, and I wish Keith Giffen had been alive to see it. Her suit. In a way, I could just splice in what I said in my video about the teaser poster earlier this summer, because I still stand by all of it. It marries the texture and the line work established by the Superman suit with the silhouette of Evely's design just so perfectly. I love it so much, and I cannot wait to see it even further in action and see all of the merch for it. We see a blink and you'll miss it shot of a green sun, and I am still kind of in disbelief about it. Without getting too into spoilers, it sets up Barrington, a faraway planet that was engineered to trap Superman under massive doses of kryptonite radiation. What happens on that planet is a major turning point for Kara and for Ruthie, and is also just cool as hell. But I've still wondered for a while how it might be translated into this universe. In the comic, Kara establishes that Clark was able to survive there for a total of 45 minutes before he needed to call the League to rescue him. It's something that sounds plausible given the fact that the book is set during their respective primes and playing with years of history. But like I said earlier, the DCU is kind of a different story. We have no idea how much time Superman has spent superheroing on Earth versus in space, although I feel like Man of Tomorrow is probably going to give us a more definitive answer. But either way, I don't think he's at the point of pissing someone in space off so badly that they engineer a death planet to trap him. And he has no League to even come and save him, especially because I do not think the Justice Gang are at the point of massive interdimensional travel. If they were, all of the mess on Salvation would be over in a heartbeat. So maybe in the DCU, Clark's experience on that planet was different, or maybe he wasn't even on it at all, and it just happens to exist as a kryptonite-heavy death planet. I'm very curious to find out, especially because I feel like the emotional beat from it could play out in a new and compelling way, without making a joke at Clark's expense. It already feels like that's going to be the case here, just based on the Furiosa moment that she gets in this shot, which I am obsessed with. The final fight in the trailer is literally pulled straight from the comic, and I could not be happier. I will leave it at that for now. Also, I really love the subtlety of the logo. Using this logo that everyone now knows and loves, but adding that bit of texture and the rainbow border just conveys the tone so well. I cannot wait to see this logo used again with the Man of Tomorrow marketing. Overall, I am so freaking happy, and I have a feeling that a lot of other people are going to be too. This movie has the potential to be such a special watershed moment, without feeling like it needs to carry the entire weight of the universe on its back. I just feel like it's going to be ambitious and fun and just unabashedly Kara, especially with Millie delivering such a generational performance. What did you think of the first Supergirl teaser? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends if you haven't already done so. As always, you can find me on social media, especially on Threads at Hey It's Jenna Lynn. Merch is available at the link in the description. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, go read some comics.